Tracks found in the Mount Hood National Wilderness. While investigating a secret location only known as the Blueberry Bog, researchers stumble upon large footprints, possibly made by the elusive Sasquatch. After a series of terrifying encounters in the same location, could these footprints finally be proof of these researchers' experiences?
One of the scariest moments in my life, I think.
And possibly add weight to the theory of travel routes used by the Sasquatch.
Hi, welcome to Mysteries and Monsters. I'm your host, Eli Watson. Choosing the topic for the first episode of this series actually came quite easy to me. You see, in 2019, I went to the Oregon Bigfoot Festival, which was really my first kind of foray into the cryptozoology world. It was the first time I got to meet Cliff Barrickman, the first time I met Bobo, the first time I met a lot of people from the Bigfoot community. So after the festival, me and my dad actually went camping in the Mount Hood National Wilderness, and that was my first time there. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I was still pretty new to camping at the time, and to spend that quality time with my father, and then in such a gorgeous location. I wasn't doing any squatching on that trip. It was just a camping trip. Although I think we did have some activity. I think I'll save that story for a different episode. It was also the first time I visited Cliff's museum, the North American Bigfoot Center, which at the time was actually just the front portion of the museum, so basically just the gift shop. Here's a picture of my dad and Murphy together. I mean, my dad's 6'3", and Murphy makes him look like a tiny person. So suffice it to say, when I started doing Beyond the Trail and the possibility of doing a Mount Hood episode came up, I was more than elated to do it. So in Mount Hood, Alex Pedikov and I were joined by Tate Hieronymus and Ron Reed, and we went to the secret research location Easter Island that Connor Anderson directed us to, where we did several things like tying the pheromone chips to the drone, taking them out over the forest, hoping that brought in some activity, doing some call blasting, playing the bass on top of the mountain into the valley below. So starting my series, I figured Mount Hood was the perfect place to start because I freaking love that place. So the first place I visited was the North American Bigfoot Center, which since the first time I visited, where it was just the gift shop, has expanded into a huge museum. It is probably one of my favorite museums in the world because it really plays out almost like a natural history museum. They treat Sasquatch there like an ape, like an animal, and it kind of collects the data that we know about it in a really fun and entertaining way. One of the latest exhibits is actually a nest. So if you remember from the Beyond the Trail episode where Alex and I visited the Olympic Peninsula, the Olympic Project believed that they found Sasquatch nests. And so there was actually not even a full-size model, but a half-sized model of a nest that Shane built for the museum. And that's probably one of the coolest things in there. So overall, if you're not well versed on the Sasquatch topic, I highly, highly recommend it. It's the perfect jumping off point to learn more about the Sasquatch topic.
Here at the North American Bigfoot Center, we take a lot of reports. On a busy summer week, we could take maybe 8 or a dozen reports. I mean, those aren't really necessarily recent, but many of them are from locations that we already know about. And our research now, after mapping all these reports and footprint finds and things, either historic or contemporary, what it's pointing to is that Sasquatches seem to hang out in the same areas for decades and decades and decades. One of our areas, the oldest report we can come up with so far, were mid-1960s. And that location yielded a sighting by one of our team members in August of 2022. They are still there. We have gotten footprint. I think we've pulled 4 footprint casts over the last year and a half in the same general area. These areas are really interesting because something about them keeps the Bigfoots there. Certainly lots of places in Mount Hood National Forest is great habitat for Bigfoots, but they keep coming back to the same areas, or maybe they never leave. Our research now, after 3 years, has barely scratched the surface, but patterns are already developing. We've had sightings by team members on expeditions from the NABC. We have found and cast numerous footprints in multiple areas. The research is already producing. If more effort was put in other places in the country by diligent researchers who had the time and could afford to go do this, I'm sure they would get similar results. I think one of the main reasons Bigfoot evidence is so rare, well, obviously the animals are rare. Obviously they're hard to encounter, but frankly, almost nobody's trying. We are trying here at the NABC and the results are right there. We are getting stuff and we're gonna keep on pushing forward.
The North American Bigfoot Center, the last 2 times I went, have sort of been a meetup location. It just seems to be a good central hub for anyone in the PNW. On this trip, this is where I met Shane Corson. I've mentioned him a couple of times already. Shane Corson is a member of the Olympic Project. He's been in numerous Small Town Monsters productions, from Be on the Trail of Bigfoot, and Shane's also just a really good friend of mine and a good researcher. What up, Shane?
What up? What's going on?
Not much. Are you ready for Bigfoot Mountain Part 2?
Always am. I was born ready, buddy. Let's do this.
He himself had a sighting in the Mount Hood area. And if you want to learn more about that sighting, check out the Beyond the Trail episode, Bigfoot Mountain. I also rendezvoused with Connor Anderson. Connor Anderson last time is the one who led us to the secret location known as Easter Island. This time we went to a different secret location known as the Blueberry Bog.
So the Blueberry Bog is an area out here that Cliff Barrickman started going to in 2012 or 13. And when I came out here in 2018, he pointed me in this direction. It's kind of his big secret spot. It's right in the middle of the national forest. A lot of really weird things have happened here over the years. You know, before I even started coming out here, someone was camped at the campsite over there, and middle of the night, he heard something walk into camp and was like digging through the cooler, and it was like he could hear the breathing, 8 feet off the ground, leaning over his tent, which checks all the boxes for, oh yeah, that's weird, maybe Bigfoot behavior. So the area around Mount Hood is some of the most wonderful country as far as I'm concerned, on the planet. We've got a wide mix of environments, marshy meadows and high mountain peaks to really swampy, overgrown rainforests, basically, along the Cascades here. And that sort of variety of environments lends to having a wide range of animals that live here. And because a lot of animals live here, you get a wider variety of predators. And I think that's part of the reason this area is so good for Sasquatch. An area like this is probably just as good as some areas in the Colorado Rockies or, upstate New York. The thing we have going for our advantage here is that this is all national forest land. And so there are people out here all the time. And it takes a Sasquatch and a person to report a Sasquatch sighting, right? So our data skews towards heavily populated areas, whether it's by tourists or just campers or hikers. And so that's another big factor as to why this place is such a good area for Sasquatch, I think.
I'll say the Irish Death is very comparable to this.
I didn't know Keith was gonna be here.
That's what.
Connor, I got Cliff one too, because I know he's gonna be collecting cans. I just saw
Oh
some
yeah,
store.
he's got a
I'm
whole
like,
bunch of them upstairs.
I don't know if it's any good. I don't know if it's any good,
All right. Well, we will all try it tonight. I'll split it with you, Keith.
but okay.
Hold it up. What is it? What is it?
Squatch Rocket.
It's a hazy.
Juicy Haze IPA, blood orange.
Is that a local one up there?
It's actually I think it's from Idaho,
Idaho.
but I was in the local store and it had a Sasquatch on it, so I had to grab a couple.
Spokane.
Oh, Spokane.
Okay, Spokane. There you
Brewed and canned
go. I didn't look at
by
that
Noli
close.
Brewhouse,
When I brought the
Spokane.
mountains.
So when we got to the bog, we set up camp. So Connor and Keith, who is another employee of the North American Bigfoot Center, decided to walk with me around the pond just so I can get a better sense of my surroundings.
Oh, this is dope.
The bog is like a lot of other places in the Mount Hood wilderness to where there's an enormous amount of life. I mean, there's coyote tracks, elk tracks. We saw a heron, which is straight up like a pterodactyl.
You're right. He does look prehistoric. He looks like a pterodactyl.
Frogs, which I'm told the frogs that I was seeing was only a small amount of frogs compared to what's usually there. We even found bear tracks.
All right, so black bear tracks aren't huge. Obviously, we don't have grizzlies out here. And you can sometimes, we probably can't see claws on these,
No, that one you can't.
but that's a good way to
There may be
differentiate
some here with claws.
bear from Sasquatch, is that bear tracks have claws and Sasquatch don't. Plus, bears walk on four
It'll look
legs.
like little holes
Yeah.
right in front of the.
And of course, if we're lucky, the elusive Sasquatch.
So last year in September, we cast footprints on the other side of the lake there. There was actually a whole trackway cutting through the algae on top of the lake, across, chasing after some elk, which is super rad. And then in early October, we recorded, I think, 2 or 3 howls just down the road about a mile or 2. So we know they're here this time of year sometimes. The question is that today?
So there is a theory that Bigfoot hunts elk. This is based on several eyewitness reports and as well as our own speculation that Sasquatch is a predator. And the Blueberry Bog is unique because there could be possible evidence that these things, at the very least, follow elk around.
What happened is I came out here early September because my parents were in town and they wanted to come to the bog, and I was like, all right, let's go. First of all, in the first 5 minutes they got out of the car, they heard a wood knock from the hill up there, which is infuriating and hilarious. But we walked around the lake, and when I was out here with them, we found the footprints, and then we came back a couple days later and cast them all. In fact, this big cut to the middle of the lake that you can kind of still see, there was one like that last year, and on both sides of where that landed were elk prints, like really fresh elk prints in the mud there and on that side there. Coming from over here someplace were the Sasquatch prints that cut out towards the elk and turned alongside them and kind of met up in the middle someplace over there. And we cast the one that was right here, everything else was too far in the lake, and everything else that way was too dry, and we didn't get a lot of actual impression. But there was one big foot right up in here someplace. And that's the one in the museum currently.
One of the going theories is that Sasquatch is an ambush predator, meaning that one Sasquatch will flush elk or a herd of animals into one direction where another Sasquatch is in hiding. If this is true, I think this could be another reason why footprints are hard to find.
They are smart enough to know how to hunt food, which means they're probably smart enough to know they can be hunted and tracked. So if they know how to track, they can be tracked. So I wouldn't be surprised if they sometimes avoid stuff like this for that reason.
However, no animal is perfect and you can't walk everywhere without leaving tracks, so some are found, which is the evidence that we've collected so far.
So there are elk tracks here that are going through the lake right there at the same point we found them last year. So this is the way the elk cross. So that trail in the muck is probably elk.
So as Connor's explaining to me this story, he sees something in the wood line.
So if you backtracked where those Sasquatch prints went under the water and in a straight line, the tree line, There's a fairly convenient 8-foot by 4-foot gap in the trees right here, right? This is a good place to walk right through, and they don't care about these roadies and stuff. And once you're in here, like you could just, if we cut through this way just a little bit, the entire, right inside the tree line is just clear like this, almost all the way down. So you can walk inside this without having to worry about anything. Stand here and just watch the elk until they have to go slower in the water. Yeah. It's a good time to try to ambush them. So the behavior makes sense. If it's real or what not, who knows, but the behavior makes sense.
Just looking at how that opening provides perfect viewing of the entire field, the theory of Sasquatch being a predator, especially an ambush predator, makes a lot of sense to me.
Elk, I wouldn't see you in here.
No.
So that's my poor man's hypothesis.
So the Blueberry Bog as a location for this episode was not chosen out of the blue. The big reason I wanted to go to the bog was because of Connor's experiences there. The first experience Connor had at the Blueberry Bog actually happened on one of his first visits to the bog.
Over the last 2 years, I've probably been out here, I don't know, nearly 100 times, I would say, is probably a fairly accurate guess. We rotate through a lot of other locations in the area, so we don't always come out here. And you can't reach this place in the winter, it's too high elevation. But the first night I camped here by myself, something started stomping around on the other side of the road from where I was camping. I was actually talking to a camera, trying to do a little thing for the museum Patreon, one of those videos. And my first thought was, oh, there's a deer over there. You know, that's gonna be cool. I'll film a deer, I'll get some good B-roll off the deer, that'll be nice. And then I heard sticks breaking, and I thought, oh, that's much bigger than a deer. Maybe it's a bear, that'll be awesome. I'll get some great B-roll of a bear. I'll hop in my car and film it from inside, you know? And then I started hearing the footsteps, and it was just clear as day, huge bipedal stomping up and down, just in the tree line across from me. And this was just about 9 o'clock at night. It was dusk, like real late dusk. The sun was down, it wasn't pitch black, you could still see the sky, but you couldn't see into the tree line. And so I had just a little DSLR with me, with no external audio. I was totally unprepared. And so I was trying to figure out where this thing was or get a glimpse of it. And I realized that I had my thermal imager in the car, in my backpack, when the car was locked, because I wasn't planning on getting it out until later. So I stood up, and as I was watching this thing, I got my keys out and I unlocked my car. And the locks clicked and the lights flashed. And the thing, which was way up the road over here now, stopped and started stomping quickly back down the hill towards in front of my car. And so I thought, okay, this thing's gonna, in 3.5 seconds, gonna be standing right in front of the car. I'm already holding a camera that's recording. I could either put the camera down, get the thermal out and try to film it that way, or I can just jump in the car and turn the headlights on and see if I can light this thing up. And so I leaned in, I turned the engine on, turned the lights on, and the thing stopped moving. And I never heard it again. I never saw anything. But it was like, oh yeah, that's 1,000%. There's nothing else that could have been but a Bigfoot, you know? It was huge. It sounded like the T-Rex from Jurassic Park. It was the biggest thing. Well, it's the second biggest thing I've ever heard in the woods now, but at the time it was the biggest thing I'd ever heard in the woods. And it was, I don't know, 60 feet away from me, probably, 55, 60 feet away. We kind of joke all the time that no matter what you think you're gonna do when you run into a Sasquatch, you're not gonna do it. The plan goes out the window the second you think, oh yeah, there's an 800-pound, 8-foot-tall thing right there. Your caveman brain kicks in, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go to Taco Bell. I'm gonna go home. I'm leaving. So I left. It's terrifying.
So you're scared.
Oh, hell yeah. Absolutely. It was one of the scariest moments in my life, I think.
shall not pass.
So that night, Keith brought tamales, and Shane was very, very excited.
You have hot sauce? Wow.
Yeah.
This is special.
Hang on, man. I got some good hot sauce. Let me go get it.
This is special. I can't wait for the hot sauce. This is gonna bring it home. This is a fine gourmet in the woods meal.
If we're gonna be in the woods.
Are you kidding me? You have hot sauce?
Dude.
Wow. Yeah. So we're gonna do a little bit of this.
Yeah, I'm gonna eat my Mountain House meal. Okay.
All right, we'll do a little of that, but Connor apparently has something. I'm curious. This is the classic. Look at this.
This is Lyle Blackburn's Swamp Sensation.
No.
Oh,
you got
amazing.
blackbirds?
Shut your mouth.
Show it to.
This is my favorite.
That's why that
good
bottle's
stuff.
almost empty.
Here we are.
I almost picked up a bottle.
Out in the woods
Yeah, with Lyle.
with Lyle. The monster sauce. Oh, we will eat more, but look at that. That is a meal.
You know, we're in the woods, man.
This is amazing. Shane's so
woods.
stoked about this.
I am stoked about this because this is delicious. I feel like, man, this doesn't happen often.
How are these? Oh, tamale's gone.
Well, yeah.
Wait, hold on.
We got
Hold on.
a dozen more, quarter dozen.
There's a little bit left. And then you know what? I made a big foul here. There's a lot of sauce left. So guess what?
Lick that plate.
Oh yeah,
More tamales.
this is what we
There's
do.
another one over there. I'm not gonna eat anymore.
Sauce.
Oh my.
Yeah. All right.
Delicious.
All right.
I ain't joking. This is yummy.
Right?
Monster sauce is where it's at.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
No, that's
The
good.
best camp sauce ever.
It's really good.
I hate Lyle Blackburn right now. This is too good.
After dinner, Connor, Keith, and I went for a night hike.
All right, you Peckerwoods done talking?
Peckerwoods.
Yeah, to say, who's he talking to?
The idea behind a night hike is not so much that we find something out in the woods, but rather that we draw in the curiosity of something that might be farther out from camp. And hopefully, it follows us back to camp where our recorders are so that we pick something up on audio or even possibly have a visual sighting for ourselves.
I think the plan is to walk around a little bit, and if something is out there, hopefully we can drag it back to camp with us. Because if they're going to show themselves, they're going to come into camp in the middle of the night, right?
Oh.
So if there is one nearby, let's go out and get its attention and bring it back here. That's kind of the mission, because we can go scream and yell all we want, but they're smarter than that, I think. So, you know the deal.
Yeah.
Let's go for a walk.
And are we doing the baby sounds?
Yeah. So Keith's
Do we
really
wanna?
excited about playing some baby noises,
Well, no,
and I
if,
think
if you think it's appropriate.
might as well.
I don't
Let's do.
I don't wanna
I don't
do-
see what it could hurt.
Yeah, let's throw everything. I mean, it'll bring a mountain lion in, worst case scenario, to eat a baby.
Well, something's in the area right now.
Yeah,
It knows.
It knows we're here.
absolutely.
Period.
Absolutely.
And if we do something abnormal, maybe they'll come check us out.
Right, because it's weird. They're smart.
I think they're curious.
And with that comes curiosity. And so if we do something really weird, that might bring them in, as opposed to just making, cartoon Bigfoot noises. I hate that a lot. Just keep walking.
Yeah, that sucks. Ugh.
I never want to do that again.
No, I hate this idea. This is great.
That's creepy as. You know what?
Yeah. Ooh.
I like it.
It's unsettling on a level that I just...
But I like it because I think it's just weird enough that maybe something will respond. Quit that. You scare the shit out of me when you do that.
So after enduring what we could of the baby noises, we went back to camp.
Where's Shaner?
Still don't see him. Down in here, clearing the area. Hey, Eli, come down here real quick.
I'm coming.
Just look through that at the stars.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa.
Amazing, all right?
That's psycho.
Look at it, it's psycho.
If you've never been out in an area far from civilization and looked up and saw the stars, I think you should, at least once in your life, because then you'll realize that for our entire life, we've never actually seen the stars. There are billions of stars up in the sky. I mean, it looks like a National Geographic photograph in front of your eyes. I wish my cameras were better so that I could capture that. I mean, here's a photo from my phone, like poorly attempting to capture what was in the sky. It's an amazing thing. And I think everyone should experience that at least once in their life. Bigfooting is a lot of things to a lot of people. For me, looking for Bigfoot in a lot of ways isn't about finding Bigfoot. It's about the experiences I have while doing it.
Is that Corson?
You guys look like Sasquatches. From afar.
Well, there we go.
I got you.
I had a feeling.
I got you.
Hello everyone. Before we continue the Bigfoot Mountain adventure, I would like to tell you about the 2023 Kickstarter. The Kickstarter is a crowdfunding campaign that allows us to create the content we like to create. If you like what you're seeing in this video, and if you like the other YouTube content, please consider supporting the Kickstarter. The link is down below. That way we can continue to do what we love to do and provide content that you love to watch. Thanks.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to day 2. Day 1? I don't know.
The continuation.
Breakfast time.
So in the morning, Shane left. You leaving?
Yeah, I gotta go.
Shane.
I'm a busy guy. People want me. People need me.
It's probably the biggest bummer of all time because I was actually going to interview Shane for this episode, and he decided to eat tamales and leave. So I'm calling you out, Shane, if you're watching this.
Here you go, buddy. Here you go. Here you go. Here you go. Here you go. Oh, come on. Don't be afraid.
That's so wild.
And shortly after Shane left, Keith left as well. However, Connor and I were not alone for very long. We were joined by probably one of my favorite Bigfooters of all time, a gentleman named Joe Beelart.
Joe Beelart has done a tremendous amount of work in the Mountain Hood National Forest, and he and his partner Cliff Olson, who's recently passed away, compiled the vast majority of their work into a fantastic book called The Bigfoot Scenic Highway. Basically, Cliff saw one, I think, in the late 1950s and started looking into it. And Joe Beelart and he teamed up at some point and started pooling their efforts and looking into various reports and areas along with their fellow Sasquatchians, I think they called themselves. But yeah, Joe is an old-time researcher. He still gets out there to this day, and he follows up on sighting reports, and he's a good friend.
I'm Joe Beelart. I live just south of Portland, Oregon. I have basically been an Oregonian since 1962. I had the usual 15-second sighting on a logging road in 1993, and I have been looking into the phenomena ever since. One of the key things I think about people that actually see these things is they either walk away from it completely or they try and relive the experience another time. And it also allows you to go out in the woods and hike and observe the stars at night to identify trees identify all sorts of things. It's going out in the woods without hunting. Anyway, the reason why I look at this is more and more alleged evidence comes in. Most of it is, unfortunately, is suspect. But there's enough things like recent footprint finds, even today, that are interesting and make you think that this is something beyond UFOs and ghosts. People see them, but they don't have solid documentary evidence. However, the expansiveness of the forest and the expansiveness of the effort is worth just that in itself. Every night out, I figure, costs $100. By the time you figure in your mileage, your food, amortizing your research equipment, it's going to cost you a lot of money to come up here and look for Bigfoot. So you look for Bigfoot, and you also look for all kinds of other things. It's just nice to get in the mountains.
So Joe Belart and his friend Cliff Olson wrote The Oregon Bigfoot Highway in 2015. It is a compilation of reports from the Mount Hood area that have been vetted by Joe Belart and Cliff Olson.
The Oregon Bigfoot Highway is a narrative of the history of Bigfoot and the Upper Clackamas between Estacada and Detroit, Oregon, 70 miles. Cliff edited it, and I typed it, and I retyped it, and I typed it some more. And we really worked hard on making sure that it was a good history. There's a lot of history in that thing, from Bagby Hot Springs to the Clackamas Indians and their legends. I was delighted, absolutely delighted, with being able to bring that much history. We did not put anything in the book that did not have at least 2 backups or 1 major news source. And as a result, we only have 31 sightings. Anyway, it was a very interesting quest, and I think that in the end, we ended up bringing up some questions that most field researchers need to answer in the future. Cliff Olson was a great friend of mine. He passed away in July of 21, 88 years old, and just kind of wore out. He started out as a logger in Northwest Oregon, and then he got into the Navy for the Korean War. One of his major achievements in the Korean War was that his searchlights led the Marine retreat from the Chosin Reservoir to the ships that took them away. That's amazing. When Cliff got out of the Navy, he went up and applied to, since he's an electrician, Portland General Electric. And they made him a lineman, basically clearing brush out in the Upper Clackamas because they had a dam up at Timothy Lake. And then he spent 13 and a half years up there, living there in the compound with his family. They had a school up there. So he got to know loggers, he got to know Portland General Electric people, he got to know Forest Service people. And when I decided to try and write a book about the Upper Clackamas, he said, "I'll help you." So I wrote the book, but Cliff introduced me to the people that really made it possible. So we decided on him becoming a co-author, and I'm very glad we did.
One of the most fascinating aspects of their research is the possibility of travel routes used by the Sasquatch in the Mount Hood area.
When I wrote my book, I was informed by Native Americans, knowledgeable Native Americans, of 3 different routes, 2 of which crossed to the east of Mount Hood, 1 to the west of Mount Hood, and then 2 more routes that came down through what used to be called the Estacada Ranger District, the area between Mount Hood and Mount Jefferson. And these were transitory routes that are still used today.
So, as I mentioned earlier, Connor has had multiple experiences at the Blueberry Bog. The biggest one, though, involved my good friend Emily Floor of the Forest Floor. And in fact, if she hadn't told me about her experience with Connor, I probably wouldn't think of the bog as being such a good location.
I am Emily Fleur, founder of the Forest Fleur Bigfoot Research Organization. I'm based in New York, but I did spend 3 months researching out in Oregon and kind of studying under some really great researchers.
So Emily visited the Mount Hood Wilderness in late 2021.
It was October 6th, 2021, and Connor and I headed out to the Blueberry Bog to look for footprints along the edge of the pond. And, you know, we got there, it was a nice cool day, sunny, really pretty out. It was pretty quiet, and as we were walking up and down the bank of the pond and looking for footprints, something caught my ear. I heard a loud clacking noise. And so I grabbed Connor and I said, hey, quiet, just stay still for a minute. I want to hear what this is. Do you hear that? We just kind of sat there for a minute, and sure enough, we heard clack, 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 clack. Clack, 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 clack. And this wasn't like a squirrel breaking open a nut or, a couple of rocks blowing in the wind. This was definitely something large, banging like 2 rocks together. Now, my first thought was, could this be a human? Could it maybe be like a hunter nailing a tree stand up or something along those lines? But the power behind this noise was a little bit unusual, and it definitely raised our eyebrows. So we decided to take cover before whatever it was noticed we were there. There were 2 large rocks in the middle of this meadow, and the noise was coming from the tree line. So Connor and I crouched behind those 2 large rocks. We had our cameras resting on the rocks in case anything came out of the tree line. And we continued to listen to the noise for about a half an hour. After about a half hour of this clacking noise getting closer and closer to the edge of the tree line, we decided to move a little bit further forward to see if we could get close enough to the tree line to see what was in there making the clacking noise. So we started army crawling toward the tree line, and as soon as we did that, whatever it was knew we were there. The clacking stopped. At that point, we decided, let's just make ourselves known. We don't want to be acting sneaky, because sneaking around is going to tell an animal that you're hunting. Sneaking equals hunting in a predator's mind. We got up, stood up, we walked over to the tree line very casually, walked toward the noise, and as soon as we hit the tree line, we smelled a very skunky, ape-like odor. Tell everyone what's going on.
So we were sitting here. The mud around this lake sometimes smells like skunky, milky animal smells. And I thought it was the mud on this rock right here that I was just looking at, but it's not.
Picture a 90-degree day at the zoo, sitting outside of the gorilla enclosure. That musky ape smell is exactly what was there that day. This wasn't elk, this wasn't deer, this wasn't just mud stinking from the river. This was definitely an ape-like smell. So we immediately looked at each other and thought, okay, we might be onto something here. I decided to travel a little further into the tree line to see if I could find whatever was clacking together. Was it 2 sticks? Was it 2 rocks? I wanted to find out what it was. So as I started venturing into the tree line, all of a sudden we heard the most clear, loud knock that I've ever heard in my life. And it was only about 20 feet away. So it was pretty spooky. We freeze and we're just silent. And all of a sudden, another knock comes from the tree line behind us across the meadow. So clearly there were two of these things in the area communicating with each other, which was just the most incredible experience. To know that we were that close to them was just mind-blowing. So at that point, we decided we've got to get out of here. You know, we got to make it look like we're leaving. Let's go hide in a patch of trees in the middle of the meadow and see if we can kind of trick them into thinking we left. As we started walking toward that patch of trees, we heard a loud grunting sound. Now, my first thought, being a New Yorker, was grizzly bear. I thought it was a bear because it was very deep, it was very gruff. Then I realized there are no grizzly bears in that part of Oregon. The best way that I could imitate the sound is, "Whoa!" It was very ape-like. It was just so loud and powerful. But then after I realized, I said, oh my God, that's actually really ape-like. And Connor heard the same noise. So we looked at each other and our hearts were just racing. Now, something that really surprised me about this experience is that I wasn't scared, I was excited. It wasn't a terrified feeling of a monster in the woods. This was the feeling of accomplishment. You know, we came close to seeing one of these things, and it definitely fueled the next night's expedition. After what happened at the bog on October 6th, we decided to head out the next night and bring along Keith. We all took a drive down the logging roads. We were just kind of scanning, hoping for a road crossing.
We were at the bog for a few hours. We decided to leave and take the long way back. We were just stopping at random places. And Keith was like, hey, let's just stop here. So we stopped the car and...
So I encouraged Connor to get out of the truck and do an Ohio howl because he's really good at those.
Emily wanted me to do some Ohio howls. So I crumbled and said, sure, fine, I'll do that. And I got out and I yelled.
I don't think I can. I literally don't think I can do it. I can't do it sitting down.
Open the door.
And then something yelled back.
It was a high-pitched, loud vocalization coming from across the canyon.
The first one I heard might have been coyotes. It's really hard to tell. Because they were definitely coyotes yelling. The second one off in the east of where we were, for sure also coyotes, but maybe something else mixed in there.
What the?
Connor called for a third time, and this was when we heard the most compelling vocalization of all three.
That's a Sasquatch. That's a Sasquatch.
This vocalization was very low-pitched. It sounded kind of like, whoa.
Kind of Ohio howly, deep, and it was directly south of us, and we were 1,000 feet away from the lake. So whatever that was between us and the lake. It was just right there. And we've got some audio on that, but they never sound as good on the recordings as they do, you know, in real life when you're there. There's always something weird going on here, but most of the time it's just dead quiet. You rarely see actual animals. There's animal sign all over the place. all the time. There are always fresh elk tracks, fresh deer, fresh bear tracks. You can always find sign of animals coming through, but you never see any of them here. And so it feels like a really weird place to keep going back to because it seems so consistently inconsistent. But, you know, it's just, I know they're here.
Now, what's funny is during the interview of Connor talking about his experiences, Keith, who was still with us, was looking around the meadow, and he said he spotted something that he thought might be a bear, but it wasn't moving, so he thought it was a rock. I think a plane flew overhead, so I had to stop recording, and Keith went back to camp, and when he came back, the rock was gone. So we had Connor stand in the spot where Keith said this thing was, and he said that whatever it was a lot larger than Connor. And Connor is not a short person. I think Connor's like 6'1", 6'2". So whatever this was must have been very large and very thick.
Yeah, we were standing somewhere over there.
Yeah, towards that pine tree, the little small pine over there.
Okay.
So whatever Keith saw over here was in this area, give or take a few feet. There are a lot of places where the ground has been flattened, but it's so dry and rocky that like even our boots aren't leaving much of an impression. So something that had large, soft, round, flat feet, you wouldn't see anything. So there could have been something that came out here and saw us and stopped. I don't know. The only way we'll find out is we hop in the tree line and look for more footprints. So we're gonna do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that. Would have either come straight back through here or jumped up through this, but it would have been in here somewhere because I don't think it would have like run for the tree line over there.
Yeah.
Closest point of safety is here someplace. I don't know where exactly in here, but
It's hard to make out anything at all.
yeah, that's most of the terrain out here is like this, where it's nearly impossible to find any sign. Like you'll see deer track and stuff like this sometimes, but well, like here are some actual tracks. Where this, here are some footprints of something. It's kind of hard to see because the shadow really helps right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a deer, probably an elk, one of those. It's an ungulate of some sort because they've got sharp hooves that kind of push and cut into the ground, but that's not what we're looking for because these are old. So
You don't think it would have pushed off that way?
if it was going that direction, straight up the hill, maybe. Or that way.
Yeah, there's so many directions to go.
Yeah. It's an infinite amount of options. And it could have gone there and then turned left and then gone up that way, or who knows.
Oh, whoa.
And not only is it clearly a foot, but this branch got stepped on and snapped in the middle there. So we know because of the branch it probably isn't two individual things. But this also looks like it's kind of old because all these little plants in here aren't pressed down too much. So that might be an old shoe or something.
I don't know, it kind of looks like a shoe.
Yeah, it has the boots look like two parts. And that looks boot-like.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there isn't anything there at all. What did you see?
It could just be a hole.
It could be a hole. It could be an impression. The ground is kind of soft right in here, so you could sink in that if you were heavy enough. It's the shape and size of...
Like an elk or something?
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Well, probably not a Sasquatch, so let's see if we can pull out any loose material and... Yeah, that could be an elk pointing that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which makes sense. There are a ton of big elk that come right through here all the time, so...
Maybe.
Yeah.
The ground was really tough, not really good for leaving any footprints of any kind, so we decided to check out a different part of the meadow. Now, one of the things to understand is that the meadow itself is actually the dry lake bed. In the winter and in the spring, when there's lots of rainfall, the lake swells up to a much larger size than it was. I was late in the season. I went out in September of 2022. So it's late summer, heading into fall, and the lake is at its smallest point in the whole year. And we're walking along, kind of looking for anything, and Connor stops.
You see something? Yeah, maybe it's just a thing with the grass. So I'm looking for it anywhere else, but like, there have been 3 or 4 times where I think I've been seeing toes. And the one that really jumped out to me was this one.
Right there.
Yeah.
But there's also one right here.
And we're thinking, okay, that's a weird coincidence.
Like if it was super muddy, which clearly, if these are footprints they were put down when this was mud or underwater, and your toes got smashed in, the grass would go around them and they would dry in the mud and they would look like that, right?
Yep.
But as we keep walking, we find another one.
Maybe.
And then another one.
But like, yeah, look, there's the heel. Shit.
Oh, wow.
There's the heel. 4 or 5 maybes in a row? That's weird. 14 and a half or 15 by 7.5 or 8.
That's within the range.
That is right smack dab in the middle of the range. Oh yeah, look at this one. There's the heel too.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. There's the heel. Right? And then the toes.
Yeah, those might be legit.
There are these Sasquatch-sized foot-like impressions.
These might be actual footprints. These might be actual Sasquatch tracks. That might be one there. Yeah. But these are really old.
Yeah.
These are really old. If these are footprints, they're very old. So it's not taking huge steps. It's taking like 3-foot steps, give or take, right?
So maybe it was in water.
Huh? So now we do this, and I mean, that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
If that would be one. I don't see toes on that.
Maybe.
Oh, yeah, maybe. It's like wobbling, kind of weird.
Yeah.
But if there's 2 feet of water here, you step where you can kind of step.
Yep.
And it's going for the rock. It's going for the obvious high point. Heel of this one to the heel of the next track there. Toes, right?
How long is that, the heel to heel?
Of that specific one was 42 inches.
Is there one right there?
Yeah, there is. Look at those.
Wow, you can really see those.
15 by 8. Anything obvious in this ballpark?
The only thing I could guess is maybe this?
I was eyeing that too for a second.
Yeah. Dude.
1, 2. What are we at, 7 or 8? All right, so if it's aiming left of the rock now.
Wait, yeah. Oh, wait. Is this not clear? Like, there's the heel and big toe, maybe?
Oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah, look at that. That could be. That could be it.
Our thought was that these tracks were made when the water levels were low, which would have been about June, so about 3 months prior to when we were there.
That might be where we lose it. Even after that point, even when this lake is like really full, it empties down to here pretty fast. When those elk were here, and the elk babies were here in June, which checks out, if the Sasquatch were following the elk, they would have been here when the elk were here.
Bro.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's it. There we go. So maybe they're not here anymore because the elk aren't here either. Because last year in September, we were hearing elk bugles here at night.
Okay.
Which I haven't heard in the last 3 weeks of being here. So maybe the elk are somewhere else right now, so the Sasquatch aren't here.
So we couldn't figure out where the tracks went. We decided to backtrack and see if we can find where it came from.
All right, so yeah, straight line from that rock, following the trackway. Does that look like a There
might be an opening there.
Conveniently shaped and sized holes into the woods.
Kind of.
Maybe, maybe not.
Let's take a look. Wow, these are, oof. It's a thorn bush right here. So.
A little thorn bush or like a...
Nah, dog, look at these. But I mean, they might be able to get through that.
I don't think they would care too much.
But
So maybe.
There is definitely.
Like, yeah, you can hop. Well, let's cut around the side and get back. I mean, honestly, anywhere out here they could break in and just
go that way.
Yeah.
Go towards that rock.
It also tells you a lot about how they think. If those are real, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't care about the lake. They're just trying to get over there. So they just straight line through the whole thing, which is what you see in a lot of the trackways in the Blue Mountains. It's a straight line for 8 miles, no matter what the terrain looks like. It's just up and down these insane hills, but in a really straight line. And then the question there is, if we get back to the other side, can we find those footprints leading from the peninsula down into the pond and then back out to the side again? Because it was walking in a straight line across the whole thing. Maybe it went all the way across the whole thing.
Thorn bush is
right there. Rock is right there. This is directly in the tree line. It's not very twisty, but
certainly looks that way, don't it? And there's all sorts of access points out to the...
That's a really good straight line from the point of entry into the trees right here, because the rock is like right there.
Yep. Straight through. Wow.
Straight through. And if that points up to that pole where they leave the trees on that side, we're in trouble. We're onto them.
And the rock is that way. Wow.
The path was sort of a straight line from the first opening we found, where the tracks went into the water, possibly following the elk. And if you followed it, as it came out of the other side of the water, it would have walked right through that channel and then out the other side where we found the tracks. Now, that's a lot to assume. No one saw the Sasquatch do it, if a Sasquatch did it. But I mean, to me, it's pretty convincing. By that point, the rare sunny weather of the Pacific Northwest started to disappear and storm clouds started heading our way. We decided to photograph every single track that we found. An important thing to note, if you do find tracks out in the wilderness, use something for scale so we can get an idea of how big it is. For us, we had a tape measure there, so we used a tape measure right next to the tracks, so we got a scale of how big these things were. Once we photographed all the tracks, I took my drone up, photographed them again, and the idea is to create a long panorama of the tracks in the field. Theoretically, since we know how big each footprint is, you could blow it up and see the trackway in full scale. I don't know if I'll ever do that, but it's a cool idea. The sunlight was hitting them just perfectly. In fact, as the lighting changed, we found that it was difficult to re-find the same tracks. And if we didn't know that they were already there, we probably would have never found them.
Well, here we are, a nice cold Cascade morning. And was it cold last night? I slept out in the back of my truck. I hope that your recorder that I see you have here was on or close, because something walked through our camp at 5:55 this morning. And a very distinct walk, and it also made some clicking sounds. So of possibly wood together, or maybe rearranging a rock at the fireplace, the fire pit here. So about 5:55 to 6 o'clock, you want to listen to what's on this thing very closely. And it was bipedal footsteps. Originally I thought it was one of you two guys getting up, but you both were saying you're asleep. And, anyway, so that's this morning, and my toes are cold.
Shortly after we got up, had breakfast, we tore down camp, and unfortunately, it was time to leave. Yeah, it really bums me out when I have to leave. So I will return to Mount Hood, most undoubtedly. Oh yeah, there's a lot in store for Mount Hood. So later that night, though, I actually got to meet up with Chris Spencer, also from the Olympic Project, and Rebecca Slick. Chris offered to analyze the audio of that night, and it was kind of our consensus that whatever it was that Joe heard wasn't picked up by the recorder.
The very start, the movement is further, it's definitely further away from your recorder than all the other movement. That might be what he heard. But all the other stuff, it sounds to me like him getting out of his truck. Or messing around with his truck.
I think Connor and I were both asleep, so we didn't really get to hear it, so we can't confirm or deny. So I don't know, it's still a mystery. But overall, Mount Hood is a place brimming with Sasquatch history. I am definitely going back and covering more of the Mount Hood saga, if you will. I mean, I barely scratched the surface of what Mount Hood has to offer in terms of Sasquatch research and Sasquatch history. So you can best bet that there will be follow-ups to Bigfoot Mountain. Until next time.